Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. The chalk shattered in Professor Langford's hand as the boy walked in late. Again. Mr. Carter, the professor sighed, theatrically glancing at his watch. So nice of you to grace us with your presence. Please, don't let your little interfere with our elite mathematics lecture. Some students laughed, the sharp, brittle kind of laugh that masks discomfort. Malik Carter didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He just walked quietly to the back of the room, sat down, and pulled out his notebook, the one without a single note from class. Only rows and rows of abstract equations and diagrams that didn't make sense to anyone who'd ever peeked inside. Professor Langford cleared his throat, irritated. Let's continue, he snapped, turning back to the board and scribbling a complex proof, numbers flowing like water across the surface. Anyone know the next step? No one raised their hand. Langford smirked. Didn't think so. Then, a voice spoke from the back, calm, almost bored. You dropped a minus sign at line 5, and you forgot to consider the boundary condition from earlier. Want me to show you? The room froze. Langford turned, slow and deliberate, chalk poised in hand. Excuse me. Malik stood up, notebook in hand. He walked to the front, past rows of students, who suddenly remembered how they'd whispered about him. That kid's a loner, always sketching weird math crap. Total fluke he even got into this university. He stopped in front of the board. For a second, no one breathed. Then Malik erased the proof with a swipe and rewrote it, faster than anyone could follow. See, when you treat the real component as isolated, you're ignoring the complex conjugate hidden in the series. That's why the divergence wasn't making sense. Langford's face went white. Who taught you that? He asked. Voice thin. Malik didn't look at him. No one. Silence. That was the moment something shifted. Not just in the room in Malik. He could feel it. The edge of a wall cracking open, the world behind it just beginning to reveal itself. And yet, he didn't smile. Not even a flicker of pride. He just went back to his seat and opened that strange notebook again. When the lecture ended, 2 students lingered near the professor. Langford looked shook. Dude, who is that guy? Outside the hall, a tall man in a grey coat leaned against the wall, watching Malik walk past. He said nothing, but he followed. That night, Malik didn't go home. He went to the rooftop of the physics building, sat on the ledge, and looked up at the stars. He hadn't told anyone the truth, not about why he really came to this school, not about the algorithm in his head that wouldn't stop running, not about the night he heard the scream, or the woman who disappeared. He wasn't here for a degree. He was here for answers. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We saw what you did today. Meet us tomorrow. Alone. RMB 302. His hands tightened around the phone. They'd finally noticed. But who were they? And how much did they know? The hidden room. Malik stared at his phone long after the message disappeared from the screen. We saw what you did today. Meet us tomorrow. Alone. RMB 302. No name. No signature. Just those words. Somehow, the plainness made it worse, like whoever sent it didn't need to explain anything. They assumed he'd come. He nearly deleted it, but instead, he slid the phone back into his pocket and walked toward the dorms, hands shoved deep into the sleeves of his hoodie, hood pulled low over his brow. As he moved, the whispers from earlier kept looping in his mind. Dude, who is that guy? Even he didn't know the full answer. The next morning, Malik didn't go to class. He didn't even eat. Instead, he sat in the university library's old west wing, a silent, neglected corner where few students ever went. Between the dust-coated encyclopedias and yellowed blueprints of ancient buildings, he flipped through the university's architectural schematics. He'd bribed the librarian to copy for him last semester. Room E302. He traced the blueprint with his finger. It was in the old mathematics building, the wing that had been sealed off after a fire 10 years ago. Supposedly condemned. No classes, no lights, no maintenance. And yet, someone wanted him there. That evening, just after 6 p.m., Malik found himself standing in front of the rusted double doors of the west wing. A yellow sign read, Restricted Area Entry PRHE, Entry PROIGBIT. He pushed the door. It creaked open like it had been waiting. Inside, the hallway was dark and cold, the air stale like the inside of a long-forgotten tomb. Old bulletin boards still hung on the walls, their cork curled and blackened. Broken glass glittered beneath his shoes. He moved carefully, counting door numbers as he went. B298, B299, B300. At B302, the doorknob was warm, not hot, just strangely warm, like someone had touched it moments before. He hesitated, then knocked once. Silence. Then the door clicked open a sliver, as if unlocked from inside. Heart racing. Malik pushed the door and stepped into a room that didn't belong in any university. The walls were lined with chalkboards, covered in overlapping equations. The symbols weren't just mathematical, they were esoteric. Fragments of ciphers, scribbled proofs, strange notations that looked like they came from an entirely different language of logic. The air smelled faintly of ozone and old paper. The center of the room sat a man in a black coat, older, salt and pepper beard, eyes alert behind thin wire glasses. "You're late," he said. Malik closed the door. "Who are you?" Instead of answering, the man gestured to a table. On it sat a piece of paper. One. Malik recognized instantly. It was his, one of the pages from his notebook, a recursive modular function he'd created weeks ago, never shown to anyone. "How did you get that?" The man looked at him, calm. "You left your notebook in the student lounge last Tuesday, deliberately. You wanted to be found." Malik's chest tightened. "I don't make mistakes." "No," the man said. "You make invitations." Silence hung heavy between them. Then, the man leaned forward, folding his hands. "Tell me, Malik, when did the patterns start appearing?" Malik blinked. "What?" "The spirals, the loops, the numbers that connect in ways they shouldn't. When did your brain stop seeing arithmetic and start seeing structure?" Malik stepped back. "How do you know about that?" The man stood slowly. "Because it happened to me, and to others like us." He reached into his coat and handed Malik a worn envelope. Inside were photos, blurry stills of chalkboards, of complex symbols carved into stone, of strange rooms deep beneath universities and research labs, of a young woman, face pale, staring into a mirror covered in mathematical spirals, and, screaming. Malik's breath caught. It was her, the woman from the night. Everything changed. He dropped the photos. "She disappeared," he said. "They said she went mad. She saw what you're starting to see." The man replied quietly. "The truth beneath the truth." "What truth?" The man walked to the largest chalkboard and pointed at a spiral-shaped equation drawn in glowing chalk. "This," he said, "is the equation that doesn't end." Malik didn't sleep that night. He returned to his dorm, locked the door, and opened his notebook. He flipped to the page he'd left blank, the one he swore never to touch. Slowly, he began to copy the spiral equation. His hand trembled, because as the lines connected, he could feel it, not just in his mind, in the air, in the room. Like the universe itself was watching, and for the first time, it wasn't just about math, it was about something else entirely. The equation that watches back. The next morning, Malik woke with chalk dust in his fingernails, and the spirals still etched across his vision. He'd fallen asleep sitting up, head resting against the wall, notebook open beside him. The last thing he remembered was copying the final arc of the recursive equation, and then a humming noise, like the sound of something old. Waking up, his phone buzzed. A new message. "You saw it, didn't you? Meet again. Tonight. Same place." No name. No signature. Just like before. Malik stood, his legs unsteady. He ran cold water over his face in the dorm sink. His eyes were bloodshot. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. Clarity. That afternoon, he skipped class again. It didn't matter anymore. The university lectures felt like children's puzzles compared to what he'd glimpsed last night. What haunted him more than the symbols was how he knew them. He hadn't studied this spiral, hadn't copied it from any source. It had come to him fully formed, as if remembered, not learned. As the sun began to set, Malik returned to the abandoned wing of the math building. Room B302 was already open when he arrived. The man in the black coat stood waiting, but he wasn't alone this time. Two others sat beside him, a woman with platinum hair and sharp eyes, and a younger guy with ink-stained fingers and the twitchy look of someone who hadn't slept in days. "Welcome back," the man said, but Malik narrowed his eyes. "Who are they?" "Others," the woman replied before the man could speak. "Like you, recruits, or survivors, depending on how far you've gone." "Gone where?" Malik asked, his voice low. The younger man chuckled darkly. "Into the math that stares back. Malik ignored him and turned to the black-coated figure. "Last night, you said there's a truth beneath the truth. Start explaining." The man nodded and began to write on the board again. But this time, the symbols were ... different, not just mathematical, but spatial. The shapes twisted into one another. Some rotated in place. Some shimmered faintly. "You're not insane," he began. "You're not hallucinating. The structures, you see, the equations you write, they're real. But they don't describe this world. They describe what's beneath it." "Beneath," Malik repeated. The woman leaned forward. "The lattice," the man continued. "Everything we perceive, time, matter, movement, sits on a kind of grid, a structure hidden beneath reality, like scaffolding behind a painted wall. A few of us, through genetics, trauma, or accident, are able to see it. Through math, like the spiral equation," Malik said. The man nodded. "Exactly." The younger guy snorted. "And once you see it, it sees you." Malik turned. "What do you mean?" "They call it the equation that watches back. It's recursive, endlessly so. And in the recursion, something looks through, like a mirror turned both ways." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the low creak of old wood settling in the room. Then the woman added, "The spiral is a door." Malik felt his chest tighten. "You're saying it leads somewhere?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he handed Malik a small, worn card. On it was a string of numbers, irrational, unending. No pattern until he got halfway through. Then he saw it, hidden in the digits. The coordinates, they pointed to a location just outside the city. "What's this?" Malik asked, already knowing the answer. "A buried lab," the man said quietly. "It was shut down 30 years ago, funded by a shadow program under the National Science Directorate. They were trying to map the lattice. What happened to them? They opened something they couldn't close." Malik's throat was dry. "I'm supposed to go there." The man nodded. "You're the only one who's cracked the spiral entirely. If the structure beneath reality is fraying, and we believe it is, then the anomalies will grow stronger. You're not here by chance, Malik. You were meant to see the patterns." Later that night, Malik stood alone at the edge of a highway. The coordinates loaded into his phone. His breath fogged in the cool air. The world felt too quiet, like the silence before an orchestra starts. He followed a crumbling dirt path through a forgotten wood. Vines wrapped around old fencing. The air smelled like rust and damp soil. Eventually, he found it. A concrete hatch embedded in the ground, barely visible, burnt at the edges. He knelt and traced the lock. There was no keyhole, only a symbol, the spiral carved into the metal dot. Malik reached for his notebook. He pressed the spiral equation against the symbol dot. Click. The hatch opened. Below him, a metal staircase disappeared into the dark. Something cold drifted up from the depths. Not just air, something older than knowledge, older than time. He stepped down, and the hatch closed behind him. The lattice beneath the world, the metal staircase groaned beneath Malik's steps as he descended. The spiral hatch ceiling shut above him with a thud that echoed into silence. The air changed immediately, thicker, colder, metallic. The kind of cold that didn't just touch the skin but soaked into the bones. He clutched his notebook in one hand, phone flashlight in the other. The beam cut through a corridor chiseled from concrete and steel. Along the walls were faded government warning signs, some in English, others in languages he didn't recognize, glyphs perhaps. The deeper he went, the more the geometry of the place stopped making sense. Angles curved, lines warped slightly as if reality itself was bending under strain. He reached the bottom. A hallway stretched out before him, lined with rusted doors. Some were marked with numbers, others had none. And far in the distance, a low red light pulsed. Thump. Thump. A sound, like a heartbeat. Malik approached one of the unmarked doors and pressed his hand against it. Cold, solid, locked. He kept walking, following the pulse like a tether. It was strange, even in the dark, even with danger whispering all around him. He didn't feel fear. Not exactly. It was something sharper, a sense that he was finally where he was meant to be. After another turn in the corridor, he found it a large steel door, sealed with an electronic lock that had long since shorted out. Beneath the keypad was the spiral symbol, this time etched deep into the metal, blackened at the edges. Malik drew the spiral again in his notebook, not from memory, but from instinct. The lines connected. The spiral hummed. The door opened. Inside was the lab, not a clean modern space. This was decades old, wires dangling, machines covered in sheets, paper files scattered like autumn leaves. Everything smelled of dust and electricity. Monitors blinkered faintly, still somehow powered. Malik stepped carefully through the debris. On one of the desks sat a reel-to-reel tape recorder, its tape stretched and torn. Scribbled on it, "Interference, do not play." Of course he played it. Static. Hissed. Then we mapped the first layer of the lattice, then the second. That's when the symbols began appearing in our dreams. Some of us stopped sleeping. Some started drawing spirals in their own blood. One by one, they disappeared until only she was left. The voice trembled. She solved it. All 9 layers. We thought it would unlock something. Instead, ... it woke something up. Something that had been waiting. Click. Silence. A movement. Behind a glass window at the far end of the lab. Something flickered. Malik approached. Notebook tight in his grip. On the wall inside the observation chamber, drawn in black ink and looping across every inch of concrete, was the spiral, massive and layered. But this version moved slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if it were alive. There was no camera, no projector. The spiral shifted on its own, and then it stopped. At its center, a small dot appeared, then opened, a vertical slit, like an eye. Malik stumbled back. The spiral didn't just watch, it recognized him. His flashlight cut out. The hum began again, louder this time. Thump. Thump. Suddenly, the spiral started spinning, faster and faster, dragging his gaze toward its center. Malik clutched his head, a sharp pain stabbing behind his eyes. Symbols flashed, not on the wall, but in his mind. Coordinates, equations, faces. A scream, her scream. The woman, the one who disappeared. He collapsed. Darkness, then a voice, but not one he heard with his ears. It echoed inside his thoughts. "You are the 10th, the pattern holder. The fracture approaches." Malik tried to speak but couldn't. Images flooded him, a world unspooling, gravity folding in on itself, cities caught in recursive loops, people flickering like broken video. A version of himself, eyes glowing with symbols, standing alone, in a crumbling city made of numbers. The voice again. "You must stabilize the lattice, or the recursion will consume all layers." A final image flashed. The university, present day, but above it, in the sky, the spiral, vast, burning like a second sun. Malik gasped and sat up, soaked in sweat. The spiral on the wall was still now, silent. The eye was gone. He stumbled backward and looked around. Everything was still there. The lab, the desk, the broken tape. But he was different now. He didn't just see the spiral anymore. He understood it, and that meant one terrible thing. The recursion had already started. As he left the lab, climbing the rusted staircase back to the surface, Malik knew the world wasn't what it appeared to be. The fracturing had begun, and it wasn't confined to this place. It was leaking through to his classes, to the sky, to everyone. He had to warn them. But how do you warn people about math? About a shape that watches you back? The fracture didn't sleep that night. He sat on the roof of his dorm, hoodie pulled over his head, staring at the sky. And there it was again, the spiral. Not literal, not visible to the average eye, but if he focused, if he let go of the way the world was supposed to look, the shape would shimmer into view behind the stars, its curves faintly pulsing like some vast, slow heartbeat in the void. It wasn't just a symbol anymore, it was a countdown. He opened his notebook, flipping past the spiral equations, past the pages that had started filling themselves when he wasn't looking. Some of the notations weren't even in human language anymore. They curved off the edge of the page, looped into themselves, bled into margins where they shouldn't fit. Every time he blinked, numbers swam in his vision like code written into the edges of reality. His phone buzzed. Unknown sender. It's started. Meet us now. Room B302 was already buzzing when Malik arrived. The others were there. The woman with platinum hair, her name, he now knew, was Vega. The twitchy, ink-fingered guy, Miles, and the man in the black coat, who finally introduced himself as Dr. Cassian Worth. Worth didn't waste time. "The recursion isn't staying inside you anymore," he said. He turned and clicked a remote. A monitor in the corner of the room flickered on, showing satellite footage, a frozen lake in northern Canada. At first it looked normal. Then the image glitched looped. The same 4 seconds replayed a flock of birds lifting off, ice cracking, the clouds shifting, then restarting. Again. Miles stepped forward. The time loop covers a radius of about 2 kilometers. Everyone inside, stuck in a 4-second recursion. No way in or out. It's spreading, Vega added. Another one started in Prague. One in Rio. Each one is centered around a single, identical pattern. She tapped on the screen. It zoomed in. There it was. The spiral, scratched into a patch of earth beside the frozen lake, like something ancient had crawled out and burned it into the ground. Molik's throat tightened. Why now? Because you finished it, Cassian said. The equation no one else ever did. Not fully. Not like you. I didn't mean to activate anything. It's not about intent, Vega cut in. It's about observation. You saw the pattern. That's what gives it power. The same way a quantum particle behaves differently when it's watched. Miles muttered, only now, the math itself is aware. And watching back, Cassian nodded grimly. We're past the point of hiding. If we don't find a way to stabilize the lattice, the recursion will consume this layer of reality, and then move to the next. Malik shook his head, pacing. Then why come to me? I'm not a scientist. I'm not one of you. You're exactly one of us, Cassian said. And you have something we don't. What? You didn't study the lattice. You were born with it. That night, they took him to the underground room, the one below the math building, deeper than B302, hidden behind walls no blueprint recorded. It was cold and nearly pitch. At the center of the room stood a suspended platform, a metallic ring hanging in mid-air, tethered by thin cables that pulsed faintly with light. On the floor beneath it, drawn in chalk, was a new variation of the spiral, one Malik had never seen before, a reversal spiral. What's this? He asked. The counter-sequence, Cassian said. The one chance we have to reverse the recursion. But it has to be keyed by someone with lattice alignment. That's you, and if I fail, Vega answered flatly, you won't get another try. The spiral feeds on feedback. The more you touch it, the faster it accelerates. Malik took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform. His body tensed as the cables tightened. The spiral below glowed faintly in his hand. He gripped a pen. Not just ink and plastic. This one was modified to respond to lattice vibrations. Every stroke would resonate into the grid. You'll have 60 seconds, Cassian warned. Once you start, the sequence will lock. Malik nodded and began. The moment his pen hit the platform, the spiral flared to life, not just in the room. In the world. The windows rattled, the floor shook. And somewhere deep in Malik's skull, a voice began to whisper. Not words, not language, just frequency. An oscillating hum that mirrored the equation he wrote. His body trembled. Blood trickled from his nose. Lines twisted. Curves snapped into place. The spiral shifted, reversed, and began to unwind. He wrote faster. The lights flickered. A monitor exploded in the corner of the room. Vega shouted something, but he couldn't hear it. His vision collapsed into symbols. He wrote the final arc, the closing recursion, a loop that didn't trap but released. The moment the last line connected, everything stopped. Silence fell. The humming vanished. The platform lowered itself. Malik collapsed to his knees. All around him, the glow faded. The spiral was gone. No. One moved for several seconds. Then Cassian whispered, he did it. But Malik wasn't so sure, because as the quiet settled in the room, a soft voice rose inside his thoughts again. The lattice bends, but it does not break. The final spiral has not yet been drawn. The spiral that remains for 3 days. The world was silent. No more anomalies. No more spirals burned into the earth. No time loops. The frozen lake resumed its thaw. The glitch in Prague vanished. The sky over Malik's campus finally looked like a normal sky again. No shimmer, no shape hidden behind the stars. People called it a solar storm. Others called it a data error. Some conspiracy theorists whispered about recursive rifts, but no one had proof. Only Malik knew the truth. And yet, the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. He hadn't seen Cassian or Vega since the reversal spiral. The lab beneath the math building had been shut, sealed by heavy steel doors. Government officials in black vans swarming the premises the next morning. Somehow, the whole underground chamber had been removed from public record, and those who'd spoken of it online vanished. Miles left a final message before disappearing. If you see the spiral again, Don't follow it this time. It remembers you. Malik tried to go back to normal. Classes. Homework. Cafeteria. Food. But the numbers wouldn't leave him alone. He didn't write them now. They simply appeared. On whiteboards. In clouds. In the patterns of cracks in pavement. The spiral had burned itself into his perception. The lattice wasn't hiding anymore. It had chosen him. Then, on the fourth night, he heard the voice again. This time it spoke clearly, calmly. You reversed the recursion, but you never closed the loop. Malik sat bolt upright in bed. Who are you? He whispered to the empty room. Silence. Then, a soft scratching noise from his notebook. It was closed, but it was writing itself. He flipped it open, page after page filled with a new equation, one he had never seen, but instantly understood. Not a recursion, not a reversal, a completion, a way to seal the lattice forever. It was elegant, simple, beautiful, and terrifying, because the final symbol, it was his own name. He didn't go to class the next morning. Instead, Malik walked across campus until he reached the Mathematics Memorial Garden, a quiet space near the oldest building on campus, where formulas were etched into granite. Hidden there, behind ivy-covered stone, was a gate that led down into the original foundation of the university. Now, off limits, he still had his notebook. The spiral in the back now pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat on paper. When he reached the stone cellar door, it opened before he touched it. The spiral was waiting, but this time, it was small, just a chalk circle on the floor, dimly lit from above by a single shaft of sunlight, filtering through cracks. This wasn't an anomaly. This was an invitation. Malik stepped inside the spiral and sat down. He opened the notebook and stared at the final page. There were no equations, left to right, only a choice. He could walk away, let the spiral remain in the corners of the world, quiet, patient, unresolved, or he could finish it, seal the lattice. End the recursion. But it came with a price. His self, the moment he completed the loop, drew the final closing arc. His consciousness would merge with the structure of the lattice. He would no longer be Malik the student, or even Malik the pattern holder. He would become part of the underlying grid of reality, a gatekeeper, the first human node in the lattice. He could prevent future recursion, protect the world from collapsing under knowledge. It wasn't meant to hold, but no one would remember him. His name would vanish from university records, from birth certificates, from history. He would cease to exist in any way that mattered, except as math. As the final safeguard. He thought of his mother, who always told him, "You weren't made to be ordinary." He thought of the professors who had laughed at him. He thought of the others like him, Miles, Vega, Cassian, scattered, hunted, forgotten. And then he thought of the people outside, living their lives, eating their dinners, laughing in parks, falling in love, people who would never understand the lattice, who shouldn't have to. He drew the final arc, a small, graceful stroke, not flashy, not loud, just right. There was no explosion, no flash of light. Just stillness. Then the chalk spiral glowed softly and vanished. Malik stood. No, he floated. No, he dissolved. His thoughts no longer felt like his. They were everywhere at once. Across the globe, spirals began to fade, not erased, but neutralized. The lattice quieted. Recursion loops unwound like knots in a dream. For the first time since the equation was discovered, reality was stable, not perfect, but stable. Safe. Safe. A week later, in a math class at the university, a professor paused mid-lecture. He frowned at the board, the equation he'd written. Something about it felt familiar, like a name he couldn't quite remember. Has anyone ever solved the infinity lattice theorem? He asked. Absent lie. No one answered. A student raised their hand. There's a rumor about someone who did, years ago, but there's no record. Just weird stories. A spiral that sees you. The professor chuckled. Urban legend, but fascinating. He turned back to the board, and in the faint sunlight pouring through the classroom windows, a spiral shimmered, just for a second. Then it was gone. The end.